Hello and welcome back to the F2 show and welcome to this week's special edition. We're at the halfway point of another brilliant FIA Formula 2 season, so we felt it was only right to do a mid-season review and dissect all of the action and the drama so far this season. And joining me for today's show, we have Inside F2 writer Lawrence Griffin, we have Inside F2 editor Hannah Pruffock, and we have GP Grandstand's Jim Kimberley. Coming up on today's show, obviously, we've had a different format this season, 4 rounds in. What do our panel make of it so far? We'll find out. We'll discuss which drivers have made an impression so far this season. And finally, we'll talk about our expectations going into the second half of the season. But before we discuss all of that, Jim, Lawrence, we're fresh off the back of go-karting. We went to the Motormouth go-karting charity go-karting event for the Brain Tumour charity. A brilliant day. How do you find it, Jim?
Yeah, it's great. Almost as great as hearing you say go-karting so many times in one sentence.
I know.
No, it was really good. And thanks to Inside F2 for inviting me along. And thanks to Motormouth for putting it on. It's a really good event. For people that don't know, we had a 2.5 hour, I think it was, endurance race with a bunch of celebrities amongst motorsport YouTubers and so on. And 5 of us represented Inside F2, and we came first place of the back half of the grid. So yay, go us with our very subpar performance. But really enjoyed it. Lovely track, and the rain stayed away, so we had a nice sunny day as well. And I came back with a bit of a suntan on my arm, so can't really do better than that, can you?
Exactly. 13th place finish out of 22 teams that entered. Lawrence, enjoy it?
Yeah, definitely. I might have cost us a place or two just at the end there, but it was brilliant fun. Yeah, echo what Jim said. Massive thanks to Motormouth for organising it, and to Inside F2 for having me along. It was brilliant to see so many motorsport celebrities turning out also for such a good cause, for the Brain Tumour charity. So that was really brilliant to see. And I couldn't have had a better day out.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously echo those words, a brilliant charity. You can, of course, go and check out all the highlights from that they're on YouTube. You can go to Motormouth and follow them on their socials, and you can go and check out all the photos from the day. And of course, a brilliant charity, really, really good charity. So if you do want to donate, we'll put the link in the description below, and you can go and donate. And I'm sure they'd be hugely appreciative. Yeah, as we said, a brilliant charity. And also a shout out to Bobby Thompson as well, a brilliant teammate. We had him as our 5th driver, our pro driver, yeah, absolutely brilliant to have him with us. So let's get stuck into it then. Hannah, a brilliant season so far. What's been your standout moment?
So many that I could pick from. Oh, I've gone back and forth, but for me, I think it probably has to be Liam Lawson's performance in Monaco. In the wet conditions, I think in the sprint race 2, obviously, we knew the rookies were going to be good this year. I maybe didn't expect them to be as good as they were. And I think for me, it was just one of the moments that showed the racecraft. I think, to be honest, the whole Monaco weekend in general, because obviously Teo Pourchaire did well in the feature, to win the feature race. And I think it just highlighted how far the drivers are coming across the season. And for me, Lawson's performance probably was the standout, in the sense, given how difficult we know Monaco can be. And in the wet conditions, crikey, we saw F1 drivers struggle later on in the day in the drier conditions, whereas the F2 guys got thrown in at the deep end, and Lawson just managed to put in a stellar performance. Unfortunately, then got disqualified, which I felt really bad for, because he got disqualified first, incorrect throttle map, which actually gave him a worse start than the one that he should have used was. So it felt a bit harsh, but you can't fault his performance there. So even though he didn't get the win, you're still going to give him props for it.
Yeah, he's had a really impressive start to the season, and he as a rookie. And as you say, the rookies have been brilliant this season. Obviously, a rookie leading the championship so far. We'll get into that in a bit. But Jim, I want to talk about the new format. Obviously, a new format for Formula 2 this season. 3 races per weekend across 8 rounds. We know that Formula 2, they're having a look at it. They see it. They're reviewing it. I think there's been a few concerns about the big gaps in between some of the rounds on the calendar. But what have you made of it so far?
Yeah, got to say those concerns are pretty valid. It does seem like it's a long way between the races, and no, it's going to be a bit closer for the upcoming couple, but between having 6 to 8 weeks between rounds is mammoth. The Formula 1 have a 4-week gap every year as the summer break, and Formula 2 is getting that almost every round at the moment. And Yeah, frustrating to try and keep coherency a little bit as well, because you're thinking back, well, what happened in that race? And Bahrain was the first race of the season, and that's only 4 or 5 rounds ago now, depending how you look at where we are in the season. But it was back in March. That's bonkers. And not to answer Hannah's question, but my favourite part of the season was that first race. We've seen the 3 Alpine drivers going, hammer and tongs at it in the dark, sparks flying, and it was great. But that was round 1 of 4 rounds so far. But it was ages ago. It's so long in the memory. So, yeah, I think they either need to address it. I understand the cost concerns, and I think they either need to address it by having the tracks they do visit closer together, just for the simplicity of understanding how the coherency of the championship, or revert back or do something different to make it not 8 rounds for an entire season. These guys are meant to be stepping up into F1, and I can imagine just how difficult it is to race in 3 races plus a qualifying on one race weekend. But then when you've got 2 months to relax and maybe lose a bit of your stamina and whatnot, it's not really the best preparation that Oscar or Robert or somebody might be looking for going into F1 next year if they get that opportunity. So I do think they need to address it. And GP Grandstand, like you said, that's where I do a lot of my stuff. And we've got F3 and W Series, and the weekend's just crammed. It feels so busy to try and keep up to date with everything. And W Series and F2 and F1 were at Silverstone, so that was the same sort of weekend. And with the sprint race as well, it was just almost too much. And I can't believe I'd say that as a motorsport fan, but it almost seemed like too much racing. Single-seater racing. I know the Porsches are there and that's whatever, but just sound like too much single-seater racing to keep on top of. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of it. If they went back to it next year, I wouldn't look back to the previous format next year. I wouldn't be like, oh no, I really enjoyed it. And if they do, that's great. It's just how they address the cost concern. So not the biggest fan, and 2 reverse grid races, it makes it a bit more entertaining, but it also might throw the championship a little bit out the way in terms of the credibility of whoever ends up winning some of those races.
Yeah, let's wait and see what they decide to do. Lawrence, if we were going to go with, perhaps races that are closer together on the calendar, we're already missing, Spain, Austria. It's going to be weird with Formula 1 going to Spa next and Formula 2 not racing at Spa. Do you think that, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you don't want to miss the best circuits on the calendar, do you?
No, absolutely not. And you want these drivers to be tested over a range of circuits. Like Jim said, it is also a series that is trying to prepare these drivers for Formula 1. And they would certainly, I'm sure, appreciate racing at the likes of Spa and at Spain, places that will be tough jumping into as a Formula 1 driver without that experience. But like Jim says, there's so many factors to consider in terms of what the drivers will experience, what the fans will even experience. Because I think certainly for the fans, turning up, having so much racing on a weekend is brilliant. For us at home, trying to keep up with other series as well, it can be quite confusing. But yeah, I think the gaps is something that we'll have to certainly address. And it would be nice to see F2 cars in different settings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's the format then. Let's take a look at the championship standings at the halfway point of the season. Oscar Piastri leads the way, 5 points ahead of UNI Virtuosi's Guan Yu Zhou. Robert Swartzman makes it 2 Prema drivers in the top 3 after an impressive last couple of rounds. Dan Tictum and Yuri Vips round out the top 5. And the team standings, Prema take a 37-point lead into the second half of the season from UNI Virtuosi. Carlin and Hightech have been glued at the hip all season long. Carlin take a 2-point lead into Monza, but you can be assured that they're going to be battling it out all the way up to Abu Dhabi. And 2018 runners-up ART round out the top 5. Let's start with Oscar Piastri then. Obviously, our championship leader. Hannah, we've already said a rookie lead in the championship. How would you think, how would you assess the season so far?
I think if you're Oscar Piastri, you've got to be pretty positive considering his first half of the season. I think he's put on incredible performances and he seems to have hit the nail on the head in terms of podcast after podcast. We reiterate the idea of consistency is key in this championship, and he's nailed it. I think if you look at his performances across the season, yes, he's obviously won in Bahrain. He's obviously podiumed in Monaco and in Baku and in Silverstone. Hasn't always been the fastest out there. Maybe he's had some difficulties, but has been able to combat them. And I think that's the thing that most impresses me, is that he doesn't seem to have the same ups and downs that a lot of the other drivers have. And for example, Zhou has had, I think it's 4 non-point scoring finishes, but Oscar's only had 2, and one of which was a retirement. And it proves for me the maturity that he has. Even though he's a rookie, he's come out there, been able to adapt well to the car and make it his own, and has definitely put himself in the firm hunt for a possible F1 seat. I think you can't, even if he doesn't win the championship, you can't look at his season this year and think he doesn't deserve an F1 seat when he clearly does. And I think the thing that also surprised me was his pace in qualifying as well, because traditionally previously we've seen in Formula 3, he won the championship despite, I think, never qualifying on the front row. Last time he'd had a pole position was 2019 Formula Renault Euro Cup. And he comes out here, gets a pole position, and does a brilliant job. And I think for him, it's getting that speed mixed with the racecraft. And it's why he does so well. I think he has that maturity and that confidence in himself that I think maybe some of the other drivers lack at this point in the season, still getting to grips with the car. And Prema have obviously put together an incredible car yet again. And we see that rectified with both their drivers being in the top 3. So I'd say roll on the rest of the season, because with a lot of circuits, with a couple of circuits that many of the drivers on the grid haven't faced before, especially Jeddah, could be an interesting one. And I'd definitely keep an eye on him.
Jeddah's definitely going to be an exciting one, and I'm looking forward to that. But you've just mentioned there, obviously, Hannah Guan Yu Zhou not scoring in 4 races this season. And Jim, is that? I mean, he's led the championship for pretty much the entire first half of the season up until the last round in Silverstone. Would he be a little bit disappointed not to come away with a championship lead?
Yeah, of course, and not that I'd like to do it, but I'll have to correct Hannah. So it's actually 5 non-scoring finishes. Well, it's 4 in a row to really derail his championship. So yeah, consistency being the key word. He's won more rounds than Oscar has, but won more races, should I say, to be completely correct. But he hasn't got the championship lead at the moment. He's still right in the fight, so there's no way of ruling him out. And if I was Mia Shariesman of Alpine, I'd be absolutely delighted to have this problem and then just go to my bosses and say, where's my second Formula One team? Because look at this talent that we're blocking up with a 40-odd-year-old. But in terms of Renault, it's a problem, isn't it? That they've got such a good driver academy at the moment. What are they going to be able to do with these drivers if Piastre or Zhou win the championship? What's next for either of them? So, very good problem to have, but probably not so good if you're either of those men that are going to be wondering, what more could I have done to proven myself to come into the sport? But that'd be a nice problem for Zhou to have if he manages to get there. He's clearly got speed, but after so many seasons racing in here now, it'd be surprising if he didn't. He's in a team which I think is working well for him, that sort of consistency. Again, another shot if you're playing that game, but that consistency of team seems to have helped him this year because he really hit the ground running at the start of the championship. And yeah, he's faltered a little bit and been a bit here and there, but there's a lot of good results to take from it. And getting that win at Monaco in particular, when I don't think it was looking all that great for him, reverse grid or not. These are the things that are going to help him get to the top of the championship. So I'd be disappointed to not be leading it, but it's not like he's in a position like the other Alpine driver of Lingard, who's just not going to have a chance of winning the championship. He's in a position where it's well within his abilities, well within his capabilities to get there to the end of the season, bring back a few more wins, edge out Piastre and take the championship. So I'm not going to rule him out whatsoever. He's looking really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about, obviously, Christian Lingard, whilst we're talking about the Alpine Academy guys. A brilliant weekend in IndyCar, obviously, where he's gone on his debut, qualified P4, had a really strong weekend. Do you think it's really difficult, isn't it, knowing where Alpine are going to, place these guys? Is Christian Lingard, we know how good he is, but is, just the unfortunate season meaning that his time of Alpine's maybe coming to an end? Is IndyCar a potential route for him?
It's difficult to know, isn't it? I don't really think at the moment, especially looking at his other Alpine Academy stablemates, that Formula One is a likely possibility right now. So the IndyCar route might be a clever way of trying to preempt any sort of booting out of the academy or leaving on mutual terms, if that's the way they go down it. But I think it's just more heartbreaking to see a clear talent get the curse of the ART seat, the second ART seat. And I think with the links that Mr. Pourchaire has, he was never going to have the curse of the second seat. So it was a bit of a inevitability for this, if you want to think there actually is something wrong with that car, that Lingard was going to struggle this year. But the extent of which he struggled has surprised me. And I was saying earlier in the podcast that his performance at Bahrain, racing there, and I think the stewards intervened at one point because of his pit stop, if I remember correctly, show that he has the capabilities again of being at the front end, being at the sharp end, coming on the podium, challenging. But for all reasons, some within his control, some out of his control, he's just not managed to string any sort of consistency together to be there. So yeah, I think he's really going to be looking at what can I do next year to keep myself racing. And if IndyCar is it, that's good for him. I'm sure the dream is to be an F1 driver, but failing that, if you're not going to be an F1 driver, driving professionally in any sports series, yeah, that's not a bad second place dream, is it?
Yeah, definitely not. He's been so unlucky this season, and it just hasn't quite fallen into place. And I think people forget how young he is as well. Only 20 years old still, and a brilliant driver. So hopefully, whatever he decides to do next, if that's Formula 2, another season in Formula 2, or going over to Indy or whatever it might be, I'm sure we wish him the best of luck for that and for the remainder of the season. Another driver who will be probably looking at a Formula 1 seat potentially next season, Robert Swartzman, many people's favourite for the title pre-season. Lawrence, how would you rate your season so far?
Well, it's been a really mixed bag for Robert Swartzman so far. Obviously, like you say, coming in as the favourite, and his sort of fellow experienced Formula driver in Guan Yu Zhou sort of took that early lead in the championship, whilst Swartzman really floundered, involved in incidents quite often, and he just had a bit of bad luck here and there, and at times really lacked the pace of some of the rookies as well. The one thing that stands out for him is he's had those two sprint race victories in the first sprint races in Baku and in Silverstone that have both been absolutely dominant. So when he does get into that position, when he strings it all together, he does have that capability to absolutely run away with it. So we'll have to see how he does in the rest of the season. If he can start to get more regular victories, that consistency again, then he might be able to overhaul those last few points that are in between him and the title at the moment. But yeah, like Hannah says, it's Piastre that's looking like the strong one who's regularly scoring points. So he's going to have a real job on his hands.
I'm wondering actually if Oscar coming out of the gate so fast at Prema has maybe put Robert off a little bit at the start of the season. It's taken him a few rounds to get into the swing of things, and had a bit of messy first laps. I think it was at Monaco and Bahrain. He lost a front wing and had to go and pit early, which scuppered him. But yeah, I do wonder, having such a strong teammate, when he's gone into this season thinking, right, last year that was mixed, this one's me. And then seeing Piastri come out as quick as he has, if that was a bit of a surprise to him, and Absolutely. He's finally addressing the slide.
I think there's such an expectation in F2. We've had so many talents come through and perform so brilliantly in their first season. You know, Swartzman himself did well last season. That I think perhaps drivers in that second season feel that pressure to do the likes of what Mick Schumacher did last season, and to be that complete package when you're still on such a competitive grid in terms of how close the machinery is, and in terms of the quality of that rookie talent that's coming through all the time, and the slight advantage that other experienced drivers like Guan Yu Zhou also have. So I think perhaps Swartzman suffered a little bit from people expecting him to have a relatively simple task this season, but it's just not been the case.
we highlighted those two in particular at the beginning of the season. We said, oh, well, really looking forward to the Prema battle because these two guys are absolutely brilliant. And yeah, they've been very, very close, haven't they? Both won some races each. And let's wait and see who comes out on top at the beginning of the season. Prema have been brilliant as well, haven't they? Absolutely brilliant. So let's wait and see. Another driver I want to talk about, Dan Tictum. He's been electrifying in some races. Hasn't quite put it all together so far this season. Obviously dropped by the Williams Driver Academy in the last few weeks, which I'm sure he'll be pretty gutted about. Hannah, I don't want to say this, but are we looking at potentially Dan Tictum? I don't know what the funding's like. Are we looking at now he's not with Williams, he might not finish the season?
I think there's probably a possibility of it. I think necessarily with the Williams situation, it's probably more, not saying Williams putting funding into his seat, but any of the sponsors that he has got, seeing that he's not going to get an F1 seat. We know how tight it is, even with the ones tied to driver academies. I think for him, there is a very real possibility he could end up going elsewhere towards the end of the season, especially, say, for example, if it gets after Sochi, if he's not in the championship fight anymore, whether he does move elsewhere. Obviously, we've seen Lingard in IndyCar, we've seen a fair few even former F2 champions go elsewhere. We've seen Nick De Vries going over to FE, and even obviously the likes of Callum Ilott and Jack Aitken over in GT. I think for Dan, he's got a realistic head on his shoulders. He knows that an F1 seat isn't a possibility anymore. Where is the best opportunity he can get elsewhere? And we know how much he loves pure hard fought racing. We've seen it on track time and time again, the amount of battles he's got himself into in 3-car overtakes and things like that. It's just massively, I think, impressed a lot of people. And I think this year has maybe signified his maturity compared to what we saw on track last year. Last year, he was quick, but was maybe a bit more scrappy than he has been this time around. He's obviously not had completely clean races and has been caught up sometimes, but has managed to string along a better run of consistency than he had previously. So he's definitely, I think, still in the hunt for the title battle, and whether if he is still in the title hunt, will want to take that title and fight till the end, because ultimately, yes, it might not mean an F1 seat, but you're not going to turn down being a Formula 2 champion unless you're getting an incredible seat elsewhere. So I would say likely to fill out the season, but I wouldn't keep my fingers crossed. But overall, in Carlin, he's done a pretty solid job. So he might not have been a perfect start for the season, but has been a pretty all right one in his case.
I'll tell you what, Dan Tictum in IndyCar, I would absolutely love to see that. I think it'd be brilliant. But obviously it would be a real shame if he didn't finish the season. Jim, I know we've spoken on previous podcasts about, it's a real problem, isn't it? Drivers getting funding, being so reliant on sponsors and potentially not being able to finish the season, just because they've lost a sponsor or a bit of funding or whatever it may be. It would be a shame, wouldn't it?
Could you imagine this season if Lando Norris just had to pull out? I know it's not exactly the same with the gap in the championship, but that's kind of what it would feel like. That's the equivalent. It's somebody right at the sharp end, maybe not in the full championship battle right there, but really not that far off. And then all of a sudden, oh, guys, I can't afford this. Sorry, got to go. It's horrible. That's the situation is. And I understand why. It's, to run one of these teams, to run a single car, it's not like it's pennies and somebody has to pay for it. And that's going to be sponsors, unless you've got rich family, like certain drivers in Formula One right at the moment. Whether it's fair or not, I don't know. And I think I've said before on this podcast that it's always been a sport for rich people. It's always been us watching rich people racing. So it shouldn't come as a surprise, but it's always still breaks my heart to see, because seeing these talents get so close and then never actually taste what they try to get. Yeah, it's not good to see. And especially I think Tictum this year as well, echoing some of the comments about the maturity, about how quick he is, and really quick as well. Baku in particular really stuck out for me, how many overtakes that kid performed race after race, like every single time. And also how much he's come into Carlin and then, I wouldn't say embarrassed, but not far off, Jehan Daruvula in the other car. He's really put his foot down, and I don't know what Red Bull will want to do with Daruvula after this season, because he's had a very middle-of-the-road campaign, in particular when you consider how fast the Carlin appears to be when it's guided by Tictum. And not to dismiss Daruvala's efforts, he's got a couple of podiums, and he's a P2 in the opening round, but hasn't really attained those heights since, whilst Tictum is sniffing at the championship lead. So clearly either Daruvala's not performing or Tictum is outperforming the car. And I think it's actually Tictum, because we know Carlin are a quick team, and we saw that with Tsunoda last year. And I do think that Tictum is driving the car to the best of his capabilities, the best of its capabilities. And if he doesn't get to finish the season driving for Carlin, maybe he'll find a seat at a lower team, but then that's his championship gone. So no one wants to see it, and I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, fingers crossed for Dan. He does maintain his drive for the rest of the season. But obviously, that's what's so good about these academies, isn't it? And you've just spoken about the Red Bull Academy there. Out of the three, obviously, Juri Vips, Liam Lawson, Jehan Drubler, who's impressed you the most out of those three Red Bull juniors?
Vips, unquestionably for me, he's been ace. Really has been ace. I was hopeful. I was writing a bit about him and reading a bit more about his history beforehand. How many Estonians can you name, let alone Estonian drivers? And it'd be great for him to come out of this country that's not particularly well known for motorsport prowess. Getting a seat at AlphaTauri, I don't know. That's maybe getting ahead of myself, but certainly this season he's not going to be turning anybody off in Formula 2 next year for a potential top drive. And couple of wins, ace to see, and the only driver, just checking the results, the only driver so far to have won 2 races at the same round in Formula 2, which is hella impressive. So not to dismiss Lawson's efforts as well, and I know I don't want to poop on Hannah's comments about Lawson being so impressive, because he is, but Juri Vips has stood out for me as the Red Bull drivers this year, and at a time when I don't know what the next steps are for Red Bull's junior program, as in what happens to AlphaTauri next year, what happens even in Red Bull next year. Vips isn't doing himself any harm by performing as well as he is in Formula 2 and essentially being the lead rookie potential next year driver to get a step up. So, hugely impressive from Juri, and long may it continue.
Yeah, and Liam Lawson, Hannah's already said he's been, a few disqualifications. He's been a bit unlucky this season. Out of the two, Lawrence, if you're Helmut Marko, and that's a thing to imagine in itself, isn't it? But if you are Helmut Marko, who are you, including Jehan Drubler as well, who are you taking if there is a drive in Formula 1 next season?
Well, it's such a difficult one. I feel like I'm getting in between Hannah and Jim here. I'm going to have to make a decision. I think I would slightly lean on the side of Lawson. I think just like Hannah said, that wet weather performance in Monaco was absolutely brilliant, and some of his moves throughout the season, his overtake on Piastre at Monaco in particular, I thought was absolutely fantastic. And to see, we've already spoke about it, juniors giving each other just enough room when racing around Monaco in the wet is astounding. It really is. And just throughout the season, the sort of moves he's been putting on other drivers. Of course, he was really unlucky to go out at the second turn in one of the Baku races. I think he is a relatively complete driver. Whether that's to go up to AlphaTauri already for next season, or whether he needs another year, remains to be seen. I think he's been unlucky not to be in that top 5 in the championship. I think his performance really does merit it. So I think it's all up to the second half of the season, whether we see this as an opening half with a few blips and then more consistency, or whether we see it as a bit of a patchy season altogether. But I think for either of those drivers, it's going to be a tough ask to get into that AlphaTauri team, which is evolving, which is looking like a really professional outfit. You've seen how much Tsunoda, who did so well last season, is struggling to keep up with Pierre Gasly in a car that Pierre has shown is capable of podiums if everything falls into place. It's not an easy decision for Helmut Marko, but I'm sure he'll manage it.
He definitely will, won't he? I mean, knowing Helmut Marko, we could have Liam Lawson in the car by Zandvoort, and then we could have Juri Vips in the car by, Jeddah. Who knows what he's thinking?
Or they could be gone. Who knows?
They could be gone. They could be gone as well.
I'd say the prospect of having both of those in High-Tech again next year could put High-Tech as one of the strongest teams potentially for a championship next year if they retain them. I don't say Tsunoda has a weak season. I think he's had a roller coaster of a season. But maybe that is a bit of a problem for just going straight from F2. Okay, he had a good season, going to F1. I'm happy to see Yuki there because he seems like he's a quick driver, and I love to see Japanese drivers in the sport. But if 2 seasons in F2 is the way to go, and then we have a future Red Bull driver in one of these 2 guys, yeah, great to see it. So if High-Tech can retain them, or however it works, I'd love to see that next year as well.
Yeah, former Formula 2 driver Alex Albon still in the frame as well at Red Bull. So they've got plenty of options, haven't they? Almost as good as Alpine. So many options. There you go. Hannah, I want to speak to you. We haven't got the time to speak about every single driver, but 2 drivers as well. Teo Porcher, Felipe Drugovich. How would you assess their campaigns so far? I mean, Teo Porcher, obviously that win in Monaco. It's his rookie season. He's so young. How would you assess his performances so far this season?
Teo Porcher has been. I feel like there's a lot of standouts across the season. But you have to admit, he is one of them. I think that performance in Monaco, I could not find fault with his performance, especially in that race. Particularly, he was just so incredibly fast, and I think I hate the phrase, I'm going to use the word maturity, but he's what, 17?
Just finished school.
Yeah. Just finished school. He got his driver's license before I did, so nice one there. But I think you can't fault him on what he's done. I think I expected maybe the ART to be a bit quicker. Obviously, we've seen with Lingard having the curse of the second ART. I don't think them as a team have been as strong this year as they have been previously, and maybe that's reflected sometimes in the points that he's got. But he's 6th in the championship in his rookie season. I think, especially considering his age, he wasn't going to get promoted straight up, and I think he'll probably benefit the most from having that second year in F2, being able to come back, put in a solid title campaign, and from what it's looking like, he could end up securing a Sauber seat because obviously he's got the ties to their academy. Ferrari no longer have as much of a say over the second seat. So whether we could see Teo Porcher in F1 in 2023, I think it's definitely an interesting prospect. And Felipe Drugovich, I think I'm a little bit underwhelmed, and it feels awful to say because he's 7th, but that UNI virtuosi is a lot quicker than some of the performances he's put on. He's had quite a few non-point scoring finishes, hasn't had the pace he showed last year, and I was expecting more from him. Hopefully he'll have a better second half of the season. I don't know whether, especially for some of the returning drivers, obviously we've had Monaco and Baku that weren't on the calendar last year, whether that threw them off a little bit compared to what they'd had last time round, whether the gaps have impacted them, I don't know. But hopefully it'll be a better second round for him, because at the moment, Guanyu Zhou is quite clearly the lead UNI virtuosi, and it's the one that, of the 2 of them, you would be backing for the title.
He was rapid last season, Felipe Drugovich, wasn't he? And maybe hasn't had the start of the season what he would have hoped for, but still, obviously, second half of the season to go. And we know how quickly things can change in Formula 2, don't we? So don't be writing anyone out just yet. Another driver I wanted to talk about, Jack Aitken. Silverstone may well have been his last time in a Formula 2 car. He obviously had a nasty accident a couple of weeks ago in the Spa 24-hour race, broken collarbone, a fractured vertebrae. So obviously, we're wishing him all the best. Thoughts with Jack Aitken, and we wish him a speedy recovery. That does mean that HWA obviously are going to have a seat available for probably for the end of the rest of the season. Anyone in mind, Jim? Anyone that stands out? They said that they brought Jack in, or Jack said himself on the podcast that they brought him in because of his experience. Are there any experienced drivers out there that they may be looking to get in just to get a bit more knowledge about the car?
Alex Albon. Could you imagine? It's a difficult one, isn't it? It really is. I'd love to see Callum Ilott racing somewhere. I don't think that's going to be the one to happen. But we spoke to Jack, didn't we? He was on the podcast, and he's great to talk to. And maybe he's never going to come on the podcast again, considering what happens after you speak to us. Wish him a speedy recovery. But yeah, he gave some. If you haven't listened to that podcast or watched it, really have a watch and a listen to it, because he gave some really insightful answers, including about with HWA, he's there as somebody to give that sort of experience, and they're fully aware of that. It's not there for him to go and win the races as much as they'd love that. So having anybody really who has some way to propel that team forwards would be would be ace.
You know, the first driver that came to my mind was, we'll get Artem Markelov back. You know, he's been in and out of the seats, or been in and out of Formula 2 really so many times. He has the experience, doesn't he? So maybe we'll see him coming back. I don't know, but yeah, watch this space absolutely. Now, quick fire question time for our panel now. So guys, Jim, I'm going to come to you first. Lawrence, then I'm going to come to you, and Hannah, I'm going to come to you last. So our driver of the year so far, Jim.
Fortunately, quickfire, I had thought about this before, and it surprised me when I said it, but Oscar Piastri. I don't really think I need to go into too much details why after everyone speaking about him a bit earlier. But going into Prema, you expected to do well, but to do as well as quickly, from even being the Formula 3 champion, we didn't see Schumacher do that. So yeah, really impressive. Really doesn't look out of his depth, and could win the championship. A really, really high possibility that he could win the championship. What happens afterwards, I don't know. But yeah, easy drive of the season for me. Definitely.
Lawrence, driver of the season so far?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with Jim and go with Piastri. That consistency, the pace that he's had as well. You can't really look past it. The likes of Zhou and Swartzman have had great performances, but haven't always backed them up immediately afterwards in the way that Piastri has. So, yeah, you can't look elsewhere, in my opinion.
Anna, are we going to have a clean sweep, Oscar Piastri?
I think so. For me, Oscar has to be the driver of the season so far. I think his performances across the board have shown that he's got to grips with that car incredibly well and has outshone those around him. I think even when he struggled, he's still been able to maximise points out of it. Look at Silverstone. All the drivers said how difficult it was to overtake that track, but he got a sixth, a fourth, and a third, and obviously got the pole position there as well. He's definitely got to be the standout and the one that I would hotly tip to take the title, because he just doesn't seem to have those peaks and troughs in his performance that the others seem to have.
And surprise of the year, maybe a driver that you didn't expect to do as well as they've done, Jim?
That is the one that's put me on the spot. Dan Tictum, probably. Looking down the drivers that are there. Not surprised for me because he's ace, but also Ralph Boschung going as well as he has. In particular, with the season that Campos has, the way they started their year, that's great to see. So yeah, choose between those guys. I'll go with Ralph Boschung.
Lawrence?
I think it would have to be Richard Verschoor for me. The way he's performed in that car, with his victory in the second sprint race in Silverstone as a particular highlight. We spoke about it on the last podcast. He's been doing more than you could ask for in that car, and still a young driver and a bright career ahead of him, hopefully.
And Hannah?
I'm going to agree with Lawrence and say Richard Verschoor. I think he's having to be both an F2 driver and a businessman off the track, trying to secure funding for that seat, and you cannot fault his performances. I think obviously Silverstone was a particular highlight, getting that maiden win so early in his Formula 2 career. I knew he'd probably have some speed in that MP Motorsport car, but I didn't expect him to be as quick as he is. And if you look compared to Larim Zendelli, his teammate, Verschoor's 10th in the championship, Zendelli's 17th. He's thoroughly outshone him, and definitely a surprise for me.
Brilliant. And finally, one word answer on this one, guys. One word answer. Who is going to be our championship winner come Abu Dhabi, Jim?
Robert Swartzman. 2 words, sorry.
Lawrence?
Zhou.
And Hannah?
Piastri.
Wow, 3 different answers. Wow, okay. We will see come Abu Dhabi. I'm so excited for the second half of this season. It is going to be brilliant. But guys, that's all we have time for today. Jim, Hannah, Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. And thank you to you guys at home as well for joining us. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe for any exclusive interviews, track guides, and of course, more from the F2 show. If you have any questions, please get in contact with us on our social media channels. You can leave a question in the comments below. From me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.